Mr. Seal, bite me.
Where exactly?
Gangnam.
48 hours later, Ha Jun Poyo was in police custody.
This is a mistake.
The boardroom glass trembled when her palm slammed against the mahogany table. 42 executives in tailored suits froze mid-breath. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Seoryong Tower, Seoul shimmered in a haze of late autumn rain. Inside, Enioma Ezenwa stood with her chin raised, her braids gathered in a low knot, her West African accent slicing through the air like a blade dipped in something hotter than fury. And across from her, framed by the storm-gray skyline, stood Cot Jin, heir to one of the most feared Kebal empires in East Asia. 29 years old, 6'2" of cold-cut composure, the man Forbes had once called the Ice Prince of Seoul. He had not blinked in 37 seconds. And then, while every assistant in the room held their breath, the Nigerian woman pointed her finger across the table and said the 4 words that would, within 48 hours, trend in 3 languages and change the trajectory of her entire existence. Mr. CEO, bite me. The temperature of the room dropped. A junior translator behind him dropped her tablet. Somewhere in the back, an old vice chairman audibly whispered, "Ogle." And Cot Jin, who had not raised his voice in 4 years, who had once stared down a North American oil baron until the man signed away 30% of his stake, slowly tilted his head. His dark eyes flashed cold gold beneath the chandelier light. His voice, when it came, was so low it almost wasn't a voice at all. It was a promise. Where exactly? And just like that, Enioma Ezenwa understood that she had made a mistake she could never, ever take back. Now, before you click anywhere, before you scroll, before you assume you know where this story is going, pause. Because what happened to that woman in the next 90 days will leave you reaching for tissues, screaming at your screen, and questioning everything you thought you knew about pride, power, and the dangerous thing a man becomes when a woman finally tells him the truth. This is not a love story. This is not a revenge story. This is the kind of story your grandmother would tell you with one hand over her chest and the other gripping yours so you wouldn't miss a single word. So if you're ready, settle in, pour something warm, close the door. Because Enioma Ezenwa's story begins long before that boardroom and ends somewhere none of us could ever predict. Quick favor before we go deeper. If you've made it this far, do me one small thing. Hit that subscribe button right now and tap the little bell beside it. We tell stories on this channel that you won't hear anywhere else. Real feeling, slow-burning, soul-shaking stories about people who don't belong in the rooms they walk into and the men who underestimate them. Drop the word gold in the comments so I know you're here from the very beginning. Trust me, by the end of this story, you're going to want to be on the inside of this community. Now, back to Enioma. To understand why a 26-year-old girl from Aba, Nigeria, came to be standing in front of a Korean billionaire telling him to bite her, you have to go back 5 years, to a small bungalow with peeling green paint on the edge of an old market road. Enioma was the second of 4 daughters, born to a father who repaired textile looms and a mother who sold smoked catfish under a faded blue umbrella. The Ezenwa family was not poor in the loud, hungry way the world likes to imagine. They were poor in the quiet way, the way that lets you eat every day, but never lets you dream out loud. Enioma's mother used to braid her hair on Sunday mornings and whisper, "Eneni, your head was not made for small rooms. Your head was made for the high places." And Enioma, even as a girl of 11, would nod and tuck that whisper somewhere deep behind her ribs. She didn't know what the high places looked like. She only knew she would one day stand in one of them. She topped her class in secondary school. She topped her class at university. She studied architecture because she loved the idea that a person could draw a line on paper and, somehow, that line could become a wall, a window, a roof, a home. She graduated at 22 with a first-class degree and a portfolio full of buildings the country could not afford to build. For 2 years, she worked at a small firm in Lagos, drawing other men's ideas, watching less talented colleagues get promoted past her because their last names opened doors hers could not. She did not complain. She saved. She studied Korean at night on her phone, because Korean architectural firms were rewriting the rules of Asian skylines, and she wanted more than anything to be in a room where buildings were not just shelters but statements. And then one Tuesday in February, an email arrived. The Seoryong Group, yes, that Seoryong Group, the family-owned giant whose hand was in everything from semiconductors to luxury hotels, was offering an international design fellowship, 12 interns, 600 applicants, 1 year in Seoul, full stipend, visa sponsorship, and Iome read the email 3 times. She did not tell her mother. She did not tell her sisters. She did not even tell the boy in Yaba who had been quietly hoping to marry her. She simply filled out the application at 2 a.m. with the kind of focus a woman only has when she knows she is reaching for the throat of her own destiny. 6 weeks later, an envelope with a navy blue crest arrived at her father's repair shop. Her father, who had not cried since burying his own mother, sat down on a stool and wept into his oil-stained hands. Her mother held the letter against her chest and said only, "NNE, NNE," 3 times like a chant, 3 times like a prayer. She arrived in Seoul on a sharp September morning, dragging 2 suitcases and a single dream. The city was nothing like she had imagined. It was both sharper and softer at once. All neon and old stone, fast trains and slow tea. The Seoryong Tower itself rose out of Gangnam like a sword pulled from the earth. 63 floors of black glass and brushed steel. And on the day Neoma walked into the lobby in a navy suit 2 sizes too big, she felt her own heartbeat in her teeth. She would later learn, the only African in the entire fellowship cohort. She was also, she would learn faster, not particularly welcome. Her cohort leader, a smooth, smiling man named Ha Jun-pyeol, made jokes she didn't understand and then laughed at her face for not laughing. A senior designer once walked past her workstation and said, in slow English, "You are very brave to come so far for a job you may not keep." She smiled. She nodded. She went home to her tiny 1-room office near Sinchon and ate cold rice and cried in the shower because crying in the shower was the only way to keep her makeup intact for the next day. For 3 months she kept her head down. She worked 12-hour days. She corrected senior designers' structural errors in pencil so lightly that they would only see the marks when they squinted. She redrew an entire load-bearing schematic over 1 weekend that her team lead had been planning to present as his own. And in the 2nd week of December, a strange thing happened. A folder appeared on her desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 lines printed in clean, elegant Hangul. The corner office on the 61st floor has asked about you. Be ready Monday at 9 a.m. There was no signature. There were no instructions. There was only the small embossed seal at the bottom, a stylized phoenix curled around a single character, CEO. The 61st floor of the Seoryong Tower was a place most employees never saw. There were no cubicles. There were no humming printers. The walls were lined in black walnut. The carpet was so thick it 8 footsteps whole, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and cold coffee. And Neoma walked down the central corridor on Monday morning with her heart hammering so loudly she was certain the security cameras could hear it. A woman in a charcoal pantsuit met her at the end of the hall and said, in English so clean it could have been ironed, "He will see you now." The door opened, and there, behind a desk the size of a small bedroom, stood the man whose photograph she had only ever seen on the cover of business magazines. COT Jin in person was not what the photographs prepared you for. The photographs caught the jawline, the height, the unreadable mouth. They did not catch the stillness. That was the first thing she noticed. He did not fidget. He did not shift. He did not breathe in any way you could see. He simply stood by the window with his hands behind his back, watching the city the way a king watches a country he might decide to redesign before lunch. "Miss Ezenwa," he said, without turning. His English was lightly accented, precise. "Seat," she sat. He did not turn around. "3 months ago," he said, "you redrew a tower schematic that my chief engineer presented as his own. I noticed because the pencil lines were a different angle. You write with your left hand. He writes with his right." She opened her mouth. He raised one finger. She closed it. "Last week," he continued, "you flagged a soil load miscalculation in the Busan resort plans. Quietly, in a margin note, your team lead erased it before submitting his report. The miscalculation, if uncaught, would have cost this company $200 million and 4 lives over the next 10 years. Now, slowly, he turned, and his eyes, dark, almost black at the center, ringed in something that caught the light like gold, met hers for the first time. "Tell me, Miss Ezenwa," he said, "why a woman with your mind is hiding in the basement of my company." And Enioma, who had rehearsed 1,000 polite Korean phrases for this moment, opened her mouth and said the only honest thing she had ever said in that building. Because no one above the basement asked, he did not smile. But something in his eyes shifted, like a shutter lifting 0.5 millimeter. "From Monday," he said, "you report to me, personally." And that, my friends, is how a Nigerian girl from a green-painted bungalow in Aba ended up working directly under the most feared man in Seoul. For the first 8 weeks, Ineoma told herself it was a dream. He was demanding in the way only brilliant men are demanding. He asked questions she did not know how to answer and then waited, expressionless, while she figured them out in real time. He never raised his voice. He never softened it either. He worked 16-hour days and seemed to require neither food nor friendship to do it. The first time she handed him a revised blueprint, he studied it for 46 seconds and said only, "better." The first time she made a mistake, he circled it in red ink and said, "worse." There were no compliments. There were no insults. There was only the work, and the way the work made her feel. Alive, sharpened, terrified, electric. She began to notice things. The way he poured her coffee himself when he poured his own, even though there were 3 assistants outside the door who would have done it. The way he learned, without ever being told, that she did not eat pork, and began ordering her lunches accordingly. The way, on a freezing night in January when she stayed late finishing a model, she found a wool coat draped over the back of her chair when she returned from the bathroom. It was not new. It was clearly his. It smelled of cedar. She wore it home in the snow and folded it carefully and brought it back the next morning. And when she set it on his desk, he glanced at it once and said, "Keep it. The cold here is not your cold." She did not know what to do with that sentence. So she did the only thing she could do. She kept the coat, and she kept working. And somewhere between the blueprints and the cold coffee and the silent rides up the private elevator, Ineoma Ezenwa began, against every instinct her mother had ever drilled into her, to feel safe. That, of course, was when everything went wrong. The man behind it all was Ha Jun Pyle, her old cohort leader, the smiling one, the one whose jokes she had never understood. Ha Jun Pyle was the nephew of a board director, a man named Choi Won-sik who had spent 15 years quietly resenting that COT Jin had been chosen over his own son to inherit the empire. The Choi Ha faction, as the boardroom whispered about them, had been waiting for years to find a crack in T-Jin's armor. And an Eneoma Ezenwa, young, foreign, female, suddenly seated at the right hand of the king, they believed they had found one. The plan was small. The plan was cruel. The plan was elegant. They would prove she was an industrial spy. They would plant falsified emails on her workstation. They would leak a doctored video of her entering a competitor's office. They would frame her so completely that even COT Jin would be forced, in front of the full board, to dismiss her, and in dismissing her, lose face, lose footing, lose the quiet trust the board had grudgingly extended to his judgment. And so, on the morning of March 11th, a Thursday, raining, Eneoma walked into the 61st floor conference room for a routine quarterly review and found, instead of charts and tea, 42 executives, 2 lawyers, 3 security guards, and a projector already glowing with a frozen image of her face. The lights were dimmed. The image on the screen was a screenshot of an email from her account sent at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday she had been asleep, to a Hong Kong firm offering to sell internal project files for $1.2 million. There were attachments. There were timestamps. There were even, somehow, photographs of her taken from above, walking into a building she had never been to. The lead lawyer, a thin man in rimless glasses, stood up and said, in courteous Korean, "Miss Ezenwa, please explain." Eneoma stood frozen, her vision tunneled. She could feel her own pulse in her tongue. Across the table, COT Jin sat at the head, his hands folded, his face unreadable as a closed door. He did not look at her. He looked at the screen. And in that single second of not looking, Anaoma understood something so cold and so clear that it almost made her laugh. He thought it might be true. Now somewhere in that boardroom, somewhere between the laughter she could feel building behind Ha Junpao's mouth and the slow tilt of old Choi 1-6's head, something inside Enioma Ezenwa broke. Not the breaking that makes a woman cry. The other kind. The kind that makes a woman dangerous. She straightened her shoulders. She walked, slowly, to the front of the room. She looked at every face in that room, one by one, and then she turned to the screen and pointed at her own falsified email. And when she spoke, her voice did not shake. This was sent at 3:17 in the morning, she said. At 3:17 in the morning on the date shown, I was at Severance Hospital, Sinchon branch, in the emergency room. I was treated for an acute asthma attack. I was admitted under my passport name. The hospital has CCTV footage of my arrival at 2:48 a.m. and my discharge at 4:33 a.m. I have the wristband in my apartment. The room shifted. A few heads turned. Ha Junpao's smile faltered for the first time in his life. The lead lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Ezenwa, that does not explain. I am not finished, she said. And here was where the air in the room actually changed. She turned to COT Jin. She walked the full length of the table. 42 pairs of eyes followed her like sunflowers tracking a darker sun. She stopped in front of him. She set both her hands flat on the polished mahogany. She leaned forward, and in a voice so calm it was almost gentle, she said, Mr. CO, with respect, if you believe, for 1 second, that I would risk everything I have crossed an ocean for, my mother's name, my father's sweat, my own future, for $1.2 million, then you are not the man this company thinks you are. You are not even the man I thought you were. So if this is the trial you want to give me, fine. Try me. Convict me. Send me home. But do not sit there with your hands folded and pretend you did not already make up your mind before I walked in. Have the courage to look at me when you ruin me. Or, if you cannot do that, and her voice dropped, just a little, and her finger came up, and she pointed straight at his chest. Bite me. The room died. 42 executives stopped breathing. Somewhere, the projector hummed, and COT Jin, who had not moved a muscle in 11 minutes, slowly tilted his head. His eyes flashed cold gold, and his voice, when it came, was a thing low enough to crawl. Where exactly? Enioma Ezenwa did not blink. The two of them held each other's gaze across that table for what later, in the security footage, would be measured at 14 full seconds. And then, and only then, COT Jin stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket with one hand. He looked, without turning his head, at the lead lawyer, and he said, in Korean so cold it had edges, cancel this meeting, lock the server room, nobody leaves this floor until I say so. And someone bring me the hospital records from Severance, Sinchon branch, dated March 3rd. Now. The lawyer opened his mouth. T-Jin raised one finger. The lawyer closed it. 48 hours later, Ha Junpao was in police custody. 72 hours later, Choi Won-sik had been escorted out of the building by men in unmarked uniforms. 96 hours later, the truth about that boardroom, leaked somehow in 5 anonymous photographs to a finance blog, had made the words "bite me" trend across 3 Asian languages. The internet, of course, did what the internet always does. They turned Enioma Ezenwa into a meme, a folk hero, the Nigerian girl who shut down the Ice Prince. T-shirts appeared overnight. Hashtags multiplied. But none of them, not one, knew what came next. Listen, before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If your heart is racing right now, if you've had to lean forward, if you whispered, "Oh my God," at any point in the last few minutes, comment the word "racing" below this video. I read every single one. And while you're down there, hit that like button. The algorithm punishes stories like this unless you tell it you want more. And I'm telling you, what happens to Enioma next? What really happens when a quiet Nigerian girl finds out who COT Jin really is going to wreck you in the best possible way. Subscribe if you haven't. We're just getting started. For 3 days after the boardroom, Enioma did not go to work. She did not have to. A black sedan arrived at her office still every morning at 9 a.m., driven by a silent man in a gray suit, and the driver brought her an envelope every day with the same handwritten line in English. Rest. You are not forgotten. There was no signature. There did not need to be. On the fourth morning, the envelope was different. It contained no note. It contained a single ivory card with an address embossed on it in dark gold and a time. 7 p.m. that evening. She wore the navy dress her mother had sewn her for her university graduation. The only thing in her closet that did not feel like a costume. She tied her braids back. She painted her mouth a careful, dark wine. And at 6:53 p.m., a black car pulled up outside her building and a different driver, older, kinder-eyed, opened the door for her and said, in soft English, "Miss Ezenwa, the house is 40 minutes. Please rest." The car carried her out of the city, past the river, past the lit-up bridges, up a winding road into hills she had never seen, until at last it turned through a pair of black iron gates and crunched up a long gravel drive lined with cypress trees. The house at the top of the drive was not a house. It was a quiet promise of one. Low, long, made of pale stone and wood, half hidden by old pines, with windows that glowed amber against the early dark. T-Jin was waiting on the front steps. He was not in a suit. She almost did not recognize him. He wore a dark charcoal sweater and loose black trousers, and his hair, normally severe, fell slightly forward over his brow. He looked, for the first time since she had met him, like a man and not a monument. He did not greet her. He simply stepped aside and gestured her in. The house inside smelled of pine and ginger and old paper. She followed him through a hallway lined with framed architectural drawings, old ones, on yellowed paper signed in ink that had begun to fade. Some of them, she realized, were buildings she had walked past in Seoul. Some of them were buildings that had been demolished decades before she was born. She stopped in front of one of them, a long sketch of a courtyard house with a curved tile roof, and read the small signature in the corner. C.O. Munho, 1962. My grandfather, T-Jin said behind her. His voice was different here, lower, quieter, almost shy. He built houses for 30 years before he built companies. He used to say the company was the mistake, the houses were the truth. And what do you say? She asked, not turning. There was a long silence. Then, I am still deciding. He led her through to a dining room where a small round table had been laid for two. Not formally, but simply, with one candle, 2 clay bowls, a pot of stew. He had cooked it himself. She could see it in the slightly burned edge of the rim, the careful but inexpert way the spring onions had been chopped. She did not know what to do with the way that made her chest hurt. They ate in near silence for a long time. Then he set his spoon down and said, Enioma. It was the first time he had ever used her first name. Yes, I want to apologize. She looked up. In the boardroom, he said. I did not, for a single second, believe you were guilty. I knew, the moment the screen turned on, that someone in that room had betrayed me through you. But I could not say so. Not until I had evidence. Not until the trap was sprung all the way. If I had moved too early, I would have caught a small fish and lost a great snake. She set her own spoon down. And the small fish was me. The small fish, he said, was the bait I refused to swallow. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You let them put me on trial in front of 42 people. You let me believe you doubted me. You used me. Yes. And you apologize for that. Yes. She studied his face. There was no defensiveness in it. There was no plea. There was only the cold gold ring in his eyes, looking at her steadily the way a man looks at a debt he intends to pay in full. Why? She asked. Why apologize? You won. The traitors are gone. The company is safer. You used the tool. The tool survived. That should be enough for a man like you. And he said, very softly, because you are not a tool, and because in 11 months of knowing you, you are the first person who has ever looked at me in public and demanded that I act like a man instead of a brand. The candle flickered. The room held its breath. Then he stood up, walked around the table, actually knelt, on one knee, on the polished pine floor of his grandfather's house, and reached, slowly, for her left hand. He did not kiss it. He did not squeeze it. He simply turned it palm up and pressed, very lightly, his forehead against the inside of her wrist. And he held it there. For 5 seconds. For 10. For a small forever. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I told you in the boardroom. Where exactly? She did not breathe. I have not slept for 46 hours, he said, because of that sentence. I should never have said it. It was cruel. It was inappropriate. It was the first time in my professional life I have ever lost control of my mouth, and I lost it because I was terrified, not of you, of myself, of how much I had begun to need you in that building, of how angry I was that someone had tried to take you from me before I had figured out what you were to me at all. And so I made it into a joke at your expense, and then I let them put you on trial, and then I sat there and watched you stand alone and listened to you tell me, in front of every man who has ever feared me, to be the man I claim to be. He lifted his head. I am the man you demanded, he said, or I am trying to be, and I will be, with or without your forgiveness, for the rest of my life, but I would like very much to be that man with you in the room. And Enioma Ezenwa, the girl from the green-painted bungalow in Aba, looked down at the most powerful man in Seoul kneeling on his grandfather's floor and felt something inside her chest tear loose and lift, like a kite finally meeting a wind it had been waiting for since she was 11 years old. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She simply turned her hand under his and let her fingers rest, very lightly, against the line of his jaw. And he closed his eyes, and the candle burned a little lower. And outside, very gently, it began to snow. If you have ever wanted, even once in your life, for somebody to look at you the way CEO T. Jin looked at Enioma Ezenwa across that table, comment the words still here below. Just those 2 words. Because the part that comes next is the part nobody saw coming. The part that almost cost her everything she had just won. So hit subscribe, hit like, and stay with me. Because what walked through that gate 3 weeks later was a ghost from Enioma's past that even CEO T. Jin's money could not buy off. 3 weeks. That was all the peace they had. 3 weeks of stolen evenings at the stone house in the hills. 3 weeks of late dinners and longer silences. 3 weeks of him learning to say her name properly. Enioma. 3 soft beats. The way her mother said it. And her learning that the man who had been called the Ice Prince of Seoul was, in private, a man who hummed old folk songs under his breath when he chopped vegetables, who kept his grandfather's reading glasses in a wooden box on his desk, who could not sleep unless one window was open even in winter. She did not tell anyone, not her mother, not her sisters, not the boy in Yaba whose number she had begun gently to stop picking up. Some things, she felt, deserved to be unspoken until they were sure. And then on a Tuesday morning, the secretary of the 61st floor knocked on the door of Neoma's small office. Yes, she had a small office now, with a window, and said, in careful English, Miss Ezenwa, there is a man at reception. He says he is your uncle. He is from Nigeria. He is asking to see you. Enioma frowned. She had no uncle in Nigeria with the means to fly to Seoul. Her father's only brother had died when she was 9. Her mother's brothers were all farmers who had never left the village. What is his name? She asked. The secretary checked her tablet. He says, Ikana Ezenwa. Enioma froze. The pen in her hand fell to the desk. Ikana Ezenwa, listen. There are names in every family that are not allowed to be spoken aloud. Names that come up only in whispers, only at funerals, only when the older women have had 2 glasses of palm wine and have forgotten that the children are still in the room. Ikana Ezenwa was that name in the Ezenwa family. He was Neoma's father's older brother, the bright one, the educated one, the one who had gone to Lagos in 1991 with a head full of plans and come back 12 years later, in 2003, with empty pockets and a story that had broken her grandmother in half. Ikana had stolen. He had stolen from his own brother. He had taken the family savings, the money meant for Enioma's father to expand his repair shop, the money meant for Enioma's aunt's wedding, and lost it in a Lego scheme that had collapsed inside 3 months. And then, when confronted, he had not begged forgiveness. He had set fire to the back of the family compound at 2 a.m. on a moonless night and disappeared. Enioma had been 8 years old. She remembered the smell of the smoke for the rest of her life. The family had declared him dead. Her grandmother had buried an empty coffin. Enioma had not heard his name spoken aloud in 18 years. And now, on a Tuesday morning in Seoul, a man calling himself Ikana Ezenwa was sitting in the reception lobby of the Seoryong Tower asking for her. She went down. Of course she went down. The man at reception was thin. He was older than she had imagined. Late 60s, hair more gray than black, a slightly rumpled brown jacket, a battered suitcase at his feet. His skin was the color of her father's. His hands, when he raised them, were the shape of her father's. His eyes, and this was the part that hurt, were her own. He saw her step out of the elevator and stood up immediately, and his face crumpled, just once, before he caught himself and straightened. "NNE," he whispered. "Mother of God, you look like a Dees." A Dees, her grandmother, the one he had broken. And Naoma stopped 3 steps away from him. She did not extend her hand. She did not soften her face. "Mr. Ezenwa," she said, "in my family you are dead. You have been dead since I was 8 years old. Why are you here?" He flinched. Then he nodded, slowly, accepting the wound. "I deserve that," he said. "I deserve worse. May I sit down? I am tired. I have flown a long way." She gestured to the chairs by the window. They sat. He looked at his hands for a long moment. Then he looked up. And what he said next was the second sentence that would change Enioma Ezenwa's life forever. "NNE," he said, "I have come to warn you. The man you are working for, COT Jin, his family, they are the reason I disappeared." Enioma did not move. "Explain." He let out a slow breath. "The Lagos scheme," he said. "In 1995, the one I lost everyone's money in, it was not a Lagos scheme, NNE. It was a Korean scheme, a shipping deal, a textile import, run out of a holding company that had 3 names in 3 countries. I was the African front. There were 5 of us, 3 Nigerians, 1 Ghanaian, 1 Ivorian. We thought we were partners. We were not partners. We were cover. The men behind it, the men in Seoul, the men in suits I never met, used our names on the paperwork. When the deal collapsed, the money did not vanish. The money was extracted, taken out the back door, into a Korean shell company, into the founding capital of a textile arm that would, 25 years later, become a small but very, very important pillar of a kibal called Seoryong. Enioma's mouth had gone dry. "You are saying," "I am saying," he said quietly, "that part of the money that built the Seoryong group came from the savings of your grandmother, your father, your aunt, me, and 40 other families across West Africa whose names no one remembered to write down. I am saying that Seo Munho, T-Jin's grandfather, the one whose drawings hang in his house, used African capital to seed his textile arm in 1995 and never paid 1 cent of it back. I am saying that when I went to Lagos in 2003 to try to find the truth, I was warned by men with Korean accents in a parking lot. They told me in very polite English that if I ever spoke of this again, my brother's daughters would not see their 10th birthdays. So I burned the compound. Yes, I burned it, to make it look like I had gone mad, so that whoever was watching would believe I had simply broken and run. And then I ran to Cotonou, to Lomé, to Abidjan, to Casablanca, to Lisbon, to Hamburg. I have been running for 23 years, NNE. I have been a watchman. I have been a cleaner. I have been a man who washes dishes in the back of restaurants. I have been every kind of small man a man can be. And then 6 months ago, in a hostel in Frankfurt, I saw your picture on the cover of a Korean business magazine, the African architect inside the Ice Prince's office. And I understood that the same family that had eaten my life was about to eat yours, and I had run for the last time. He reached down. He opened the battered suitcase. He pulled out a thick brown folder tied with string. "Names," he said. "Bank account numbers. The original shipping manifests. The names of the men in suits. Photographs from 1994. Even a tape, a small cassette tape, of one of the meetings, because I was not as stupid as they thought I was. I have carried this folder, NNE on my back, across 4 continents, for 23 years. And I have come to give it to you. Because you are inside the house. Because if anyone in this generation can finish what they did to ours, it is you. Or," and here his voice cracked, "just once. Or you can burn it. You can throw it in the river. You can decide that your love for that boy upstairs is more important than the names of 40 grandmothers who lost everything in 1995. I will not judge you. I have no right to judge anyone. I came to give you the choice my own brother was never given." He set the folder on the small glass table between them. He stood. He bowed, actually bowed, deeply, the way old men in Nigeria bow when they are asking the dead for forgiveness. and he said, I am at the hostel junction in IT1, room 12. If you do not come in 7 days, I will assume you have chosen. Either way, NNE. You are the joy of my life. I am sorry for everything I cost your father. I am sorry for the smoke. I am sorry I was not at your university graduation. I am sorry I have only this much to give you this late. And he walked slowly out of the lobby. He left the folder. He left the smell of the brown jacket. He left a thin line of dust on the marble where his suitcase had rested. And Enioma Ezenwa sat alone in the foyer of the Seoryong Tower with her grandmother's stolen money in a folder on her knees, and tried for a very long time to remember how to breathe. Now stop. Stop right where you are. If you've made it this far, if you are sitting forward, if your chest is tight, if you are whispering no, no, no at the screen, I'm begging you, do not let this video die in the algorithm. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Comment the words I can't breathe so I know you're still with me. Because what Enioma chose to do next, and what COT Jin already knew about all of it, will redefine for you what loyalty, love, and inheritance really mean. This is the climax. Hold on to something. She did not go home that night. She did not go to the stone house. She did not answer her phone, even when it rang at 9 p.m., even when it rang at 11, even when at 1 a.m. a single text arrived from T. Jin that read only, "Are you safe?" She wrote back 2 words, "I am thinking," and then she turned the phone off. She sat on her single bed in her tiny office stool with the brown folder on her lap, and she opened it. She read it for 6 straight hours, the shipping manifest, the bank statements, the 4 photographs faded at the corners of men in 1990s suits standing on a dock in Inchan. She found in one of them a young Seo Munho, T-Jin's grandfather, the man whose architectural drawings hung in the hallway of the stone house, standing beside another man who, even in the bad photograph, looked unmistakably like a younger, harder version of old Choi Won-sik, the man T-Jin had thrown out of the building 3 weeks ago. The man whose nephew had tried to frame her. And suddenly, sitting there at 4 a.m. with her grandmother's stolen years on her thighs, Enioma understood. Choi Won-sik had not tried to frame her because she was foreign. He had not tried to frame her because she was close to T-Jin. He had tried to frame her because he had recognized her name, Ezenwa. The same name on a 1995 shipping manifest signed by her uncle Aikana that had built the very textile fortune Choi Won-sik had spent 25 years quietly skimming. He had tried to frame her not to embarrass T-Jin, but to bury her before she could ever find out who her own family had been to that company. And now Choi Won-sik was gone, thrown out, disgraced. But the secret he had been protecting was still inside the building, still inside the brown folder. Still inside Enioma's hands. The question was, did T-Jin know? Had he always known? Had he hired her, courted her, knelt before her on his grandfather's floor because of her name, or in spite of it? Or, worst of all, because he had wanted to keep the daughter of the men his grandfather had robbed close enough to watch? She stood up. She washed her face. She put on the navy dress again, the graduation dress. The only thing in her closet that still felt like her mother. She braided her hair tight against her scalp. She picked up the folder. And at 6:47 a.m., she got into a taxi and gave the driver the address of the stone house in the hills. T-Jin opened the door himself. He had not slept. His sweater was the same one from 3 nights ago. His eyes, when they met hers, were the eyes of a man who already knew. She stepped inside without speaking. She walked to the dining room. She set the folder on the table. She sat down, and she said very calmly, "Tell me what you know." He sat opposite her. He did not touch the folder. He looked at it the way a man looks at a wound on a body he loves. And he began to speak. "I knew," he said. "The day I ordered your file pulled, the day after the boardroom, I asked our internal team to deep research you because I needed to know, for the police, for the prosecutor, for the board, exactly who I was risking the company for. They produced a 40-page document. On page 11, I learned that your uncle, Aikana Ezenwa, had been a co-signer on a 1995 shipping import scheme called Hanmin West Africa Holdings. On page 12, I learned that Hanmin West Africa Holdings had been quietly absorbed into the founding capital of what would later become Seoryong Textiles. On page 13, I learned that my grandfather's personal accountant had been the architect of that absorption. On page 14, I learned that of the original West African co-signers, 3 had died in unexplained circumstances, 1 had vanished in Casablanca, and the 5th, your uncle, had been declared dead by his own family in 2003 after burning down their compound. I read all 40 pages. I closed the file. I sat in my office, and I cried. Eneoma. For the first time since my mother's funeral, I cried. I cried for 2 hours. He paused. He took a long breath. And then I made a choice. I chose not to tell you, because I was afraid that the moment you knew, you would look at me, and you would see them. And I would lose the only thing in my life that had ever made me believe my grandfather's mistakes did not have to be my inheritance. I knew it was cowardly. I knew it was wrong. I knew, the morning I knelt in front of you, that I was kneeling to a woman whose grandmother my family had robbed, and that I was asking her to forgive me for a sentence about biting when I had not yet asked her to forgive me for something so much larger. I made that night. I decided that I would give myself 1 month. 1 month to tell you. 1 month to draft a quiet restitution plan. To the surviving families, to your father, to your aunt, to your grandmother's grave. 1 month to make sure that when you found out from me, and that the apology was not just a sentence but a signed document with numbers on it. Your uncle has, unfortunately, arrived 3 weeks early. He finally reached forward. He did not open the folder. He simply laid his palm flat on top of it. I am the grandson of the man who burned your family, he said. I cannot change that. I would not even if I could, because to change it would be to unmake you, and you are the most necessary thing I have ever found. But I can do this. I can give it back, all of it, with interest, with apology, with a name carved on a wall somewhere if your father will allow it. I can dismantle the part of this company that was built on those bones, slowly, legally, so that the body keeps standing but the rot is cut out. I can do this whether you stay or whether you go. I will do it whether you stay or whether you go. But I am asking you, with both hands open, and here his voice did, for the first time, finally break. I am asking you to stay, not because you owe me anything. You owe me nothing. The opposite. I am asking because of all the women in the world who could ever look at me and see exactly who I come from. You are the only one I want to be seen by. And if I am to become a man worth the name my grandfather did not deserve, I want to become him with you in the room. Outside, the snow that had begun 3 weeks ago had turned, very gently, into a soft late winter rain. The pines dripped. The candle, which she had not noticed him light, flickered between them. And Eneoma Ezenwa, 26 years old, daughter of a loom repairer and a smoked catfish seller, holder of a brown folder that contained 23 years of running and 40 grandmother's savings, looked at the man across the table from her and said, very softly, the truest thing she had ever said in any language. My grandmother used to braid my hair on Sunday mornings, she said. She would whisper to me, your head was not made for small rooms. Your head was made for the high places. I used to think she meant towers like this one. I used to think she meant boardrooms and titles and the kind of suits men wear when they want to look untouchable. I was a child. I did not understand her. She reached across the table. She took his hand. She did not squeeze it. She simply held it, palm against palm, the way her father used to hold her mother's hand at the front of the church on Sunday mornings before the offering. She did not mean towers, and Neoma said. She meant the high places inside other people, the places where shame lives, the places where guilt has built its little houses, the places where men hide the things they cannot face. Those are the high places. Those are the rooms my head was made for. And you, Seot Jin, are standing in the highest one I have ever walked into. So no, I am not leaving. I am not leaving because I am not finished. I am going to walk into every single one of those rooms inside you, and I am going to open every window, and I am going to let the light in, and I am going to make you face every name in that folder by their full names. We are going to call my father tonight from this house. You are going to apologize to him in your own voice. You are going to do it in English so he understands every word. We are going to call my aunt. We are going to call the families of the 3 who died. Where there are graves, we are going to visit them. Where there are children, we are going to put their grandchildren through school. We are going to do it slowly. We are going to do it correctly. We are going to do it for the rest of our lives, if that is what it takes. And we are not going to do it because you are kneeling in front of me. We are going to do it because it is right. And then, and only then, when every name has been spoken aloud and every debt has a number beside it and every grandmother has been honored by her full Christian name and her full village name, then, C.O.T. Jin, you can ask me again about staying, about the high places, about all of it. He did not speak for a long time. Then he turned her hand over very gently and pressed his forehead against the inside of her wrist again, just like he had 3 weeks ago. And he stayed there, and this time, Enioma Ezenwa did something she had not done in 18 years. She lifted her free hand, and she rested it very softly on the back of his head. And she whispered, in Igbo, the words her grandmother used to whisper to her when she was small and frightened of the dark. It will be well. It will be well. It will be well. And outside the rain kept falling, and the candle burned down. And somewhere, 18 years too late and exactly on time, an old woman in an empty coffin under a mango tree in Aba turned over once in her grave and for the first time since 1995, slept. It took them 11 months. 11 months of lawyers, of forensic accountants, of quiet flights to Lagos and Abidjan and Cotonou. 11 months of T-Jin sitting in the dim living room of Neoma's father's repair shop in Aba, drinking lukewarm Maltina, listening without flinching, as a 61-year-old Nigerian man told him, in a slow, steady voice, exactly what 1995 had cost his family. 11 months of restitution payments wired in batches small enough not to alarm the board, structured legally enough to survive any audit. 11 months of a slow, surgical divestment of the textile arm. 11 months of the surviving families of Hanmin West Africa Holdings receiving thick envelopes with notarized letters and bank drafts and, in each one, a single handwritten line in English. On behalf of my grandfather, who could not, C.O.T. Jin, Ha Junpyo was sentenced to 6 years for industrial espionage. Choi Won-sik, when the second wave of documents reached the prosecutors, was sentenced to 14 years for charges that took the lawyers 4 days to read aloud in court. The Seoryong board, after a brief and bloodless internal war, voted C.O.T. Jin in as chairman by a margin of 31-4. He used the occasion of his inauguration speech to do something no Keeball heir in the modern history of South Korea had ever done. He apologized, publicly, by name, to 40 grandmothers. He read each of their names aloud, slowly in Korean and English. The video, of course, broke the internet a second time. Some called him weak. Some called him a traitor to his class. But on the day the speech aired, 3 different ministries in 3 different West African countries quietly opened files on Korean foreign investment that had been gathering dust for 30 years. And the next time a Keeball negotiated a trade deal in Lagos, the room was different. Everyone noticed. Nobody said why. Eneoma Ezenwa was promoted, eventually, to head of international design strategy. She married C.O.T. Jin on a soft April morning under the cypress trees of the stone house in the hills. Her father walked her down the gravel path in a borrowed suit, weeping the entire way. Her mother wore the iro and buba she had been saving for 19 years. Her 3 sisters carried small bouquets of yellow chrysanthemums and laughed so hard during the ceremony that the priest had to start his blessing twice. Her uncle Ikana, yes, Ikana, alive, fed, housed, slowly being knitted back into a family that had buried him 18 years too soon, sat in the front row beside his brother, and the 2 old men held hands the entire ceremony, and neither one spoke a single word. They didn't need to. Some things in life, once you have run far enough from them, you know how to come home to in silence. The stone house has a nursery now. The walls are painted the color of pale honey. The cot, hand-carved, was made by Enioma's father, who flew out for 3 weeks to build it himself in C.O. Munho's old workshop at the back of the property. The same workshop where, 60 years earlier, An old Korean architect had drawn the courtyard houses he believed were his truest legacy. Above the cot hangs a single framed item. It is not a baby photograph. It is not a wedding invitation. It is not even one of CEO Munho's drawings. It is a photograph, faded at the corners, of an old woman in a yellow head wrap, sitting under a mango tree in Aba in 1989, smiling at a camera she did not entirely trust. Enioma's grandmother, Adi Zezenwa, and underneath the frame, carved into a small piece of pale pine by C.O. Jin himself, with his own hands, are 5 words in English. Your head, the high places. Some stories end when the villain is punished. Some end when the lovers kiss. Some end when the inheritance is paid back. This story, the one I've told you tonight, ends in none of those places. This story ends in a quiet room with a cot and a photograph and a young woman who used to live in a green-painted bungalow at the edge of an old market road, standing in the doorway in soft socks, watching her sleeping daughter and whispering down to her, very, very softly, in 3 languages, the same 5-word blessing her grandmother once whispered to her. Your head, the high places. Because here is what Neoma Ezenwa learned in the end that I want you to learn too. The high places are not towers. The high places are not boardrooms. The high places are not the corner offices on the 61st floor. The high places are the small, dark, locked rooms inside other people, the ones full of shame and guilt and the names of grandmothers nobody bothered to remember. And the only people brave enough to walk into those rooms and open the windows and let the light in are the ones whose own grandmothers once braided their hair on Sunday mornings and told them, against every reasonable expectation of the world, that their heads were made for somewhere higher than where they were born. If anyone has ever told you that your head is too big for the room you are in, listen to them. They are not insulting you. They are pointing you toward your real life. Hey, before you go, I know you've been with me for a long time. I know you have somewhere to be. I know your tea has probably gone cold. So I'm going to keep this short. If Neowama's story moved you even a little, if you cried or smiled or thought of your own grandmother or your own uncle or your own buried name, I want you to do 4 small things for me before you click away. Number 1, hit subscribe. We are building, very slowly, a quiet community on this channel of people who still believe stories should be long enough to break your heart and gentle enough to put it back together. You belong here. Number 2, hit the like button. It costs you nothing. It tells the algorithm that stories like Enioma's deserve to find the next person who needs them. Number 3, comment 1 word, just 1. The name of the grandmother, or the aunt, or the uncle, or the person in your own life who once told you that your head was made for the high places. Just their name. I read every single comment, and I promise you, somewhere in the world tonight, somebody who shares that name will read it and feel, for one brief moment, less alone. And number 4, come back. Next week we tell another one. A true feeling story about another person who walked into a room they did not belong in and changed it without ever raising their voice. Until then, go drink something warm. Call somebody you love. Tell them their head was made for the high places. And remember, every grandmother in every village in every country in this world is, right now, somewhere, braiding somebody's hair and whispering. The high places are listening. Go fill them. Good night.